In this lesson, we'll learn techniques for extending or modifying a hue by using tints, shades, and tones. Okay, I have our basic subtractive color wheel here in front of me that we've looked at over the last couple of lessons. So now when it comes to the hues that you have available to you, in the digital world of today, we're actually pretty spoiled. Applications like Photoshop here allow us to have access to millions of colors. Now, if you're actually a traditional artist, maybe you're a painter, then you have to purchase every tube of paint. So it becomes beneficial to you to learn how to mix your own colors out of maybe a smaller number of these tubes of paint. So one of these techniques, or rather one method for sort of extending the colors that you do have, is to create tints and shades of that color. Now, we spoke about these earlier in this course. If you remember, a shade is simply created by adding black to a hue. So you can see here I've taken these basic hues that we've got on our subtractive color wheel, and I've simply added an increment of black, getting darker and darker towards the center of our circle here. So you can see here how the color is still fairly similar, but it's simply getting darker in value. Now, not only are we changing the value of these colors, but by adding black, remember, we're also changing the intensity. So if we were to look at, say, this green right here, that's a pretty intense color. By adding black, you can see the more black we add, the less intense that color becomes. So not only are we changing the value, but we're also modifying the purity, or in this case, the intensity of the color itself. Now, that was shades. Now, if you remember, we can also create what's known as a tint of a color. Now, a tint is created by mixing white with a color. If you're a traditional painter, you could take your hue and you could mix in some white, and you could create some hues that are like these right here in this outer ring. Now, if by chance you're a graphic designer, then the word tint to you has quite a bit more meaning, just because it's actually a technical term that has to do with commercial printing presses. But it's the same basic philosophy in creating a tint. You're simply taking a hue and it's adding more white into that hue to create a variation of it. So again, with the tints, we are modifying both the intensity or the purity of our hue, and we're also modifying the value of that hue as well. So these are just, again, some different stepping tints of these basic colors on this subtractive color wheel. Now, these are tints and shades. If you're a traditional painter, then you may be familiar with a process that is basically known as creating a tone of a hue. Now, by adding a gray color to your hue, you're creating a tone of that hue. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and hide these two layers and bring in both the lighter tones and the darker tones. So now I haven't used an extremely dark gray, but I've used something darker than a 50% gray, and I've also used something lighter than a 50% gray as well. Just laid it on top of our basic hues, and you can already see a pretty dramatic change, even especially rather with the lighter gray here. So basically, what the effect we have here is we're reducing the chroma of our hue by sending it closer to a gray color. Now, obviously, a side effect of this graying down of our color is that it's not near as vibrant. So if you are working with a limited palette and you need to mute your colors a little bit, as opposed to using very loud, vibrant colors, then graying down your colors is actually a pretty common technique. Now, again, if you're a traditional painter, then you may have been taught to gray down your colors, not by mixing the color gray into them, but rather by mixing their complement into them as well. So I'm actually going to just grab this paint layer up here and use my brush tool here, and I want to show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and pick on this yellow over here, and I'm simply going to hold Alt and sample that here, and we'll just drop in a nice big blob of yellow right over here. Now, the complement, we're going to be talking here in the next lesson when we speak about harmonies of colors, is right across the color wheel. So we've got here the yellow color. Its complement is going to be directly across, and there's going to be this sort of this purple color. So I'll go ahead and sample that and simply blob some right in the center of our circle there. And I want to grab my smudge tool. And let's just kind of go after this and start smudging this around and blending the two colors together. So in this case, the value of that purple was quite a bit darker, so we don't need a whole lot. So I'm going to kind of be, as I'm blending these together, I'm going to kind of be mixing a little bit more of that yellow into the purple to just kind of tame it down some. Maybe increase the size of my brush a little bit. It's kind of blotting away at that. There we go. Now we're reaching sort of that gray tone. So you can see here that I still actually have a pretty dark gray in the center, so I may even want to continue to mix in more yellow if I wanted a little more subtle shift in tone. But that's pretty good for right now, I think. So let me go ahead and grab my brush tool again, and I'll do that with the keyboard shortcut B. And I'm simply going to sample one of these colors here. Let's go ahead and grab maybe that one here. I'll just kind of paint some of that in and see if we can't maybe find a gray over here that's pretty similar to that. There we go. That's actually pretty close. Again, using a darker gray here in the center because of the drastic difference in value between those two hues, we're actually able to come pretty close with just one of those increments that I set here inside that center ring of our tones for the color wheel. So in this lesson, we've learned again and just kind of reinforced what exactly a tint, a shade, and a tone is, and some of the reasons we may want to use these in our work.